Let me ask you a question. Can you throw the first strike in a fight? In my opinion, absolutely. However, there are a few things that we need to take into consideration. First off, what is the actual scenario in which you do have to throw the first strike? And we'll touch upon a couple of the things that you do have to take into consideration. And number two, what is the best strike to utilize? Now, when it comes to fighting as a whole, I will always emphasize that if you have the ability or opportunity to run away and just get out of the situation as a whole, that is going to be your best bet 100% of the time. But again, you're not always able to do that. And sometimes we are forced to engage in a fight, whether or not we actually want to be there. Now, again, de-escalation is always going to be a good option, and obviously running away is going to be good options. But let's say you do actually have to engage in a fight. This is kind of where it comes into the principle of, do I throw the first strike, or do I wait for you to attack me in any way, shape, or form, and then I now have to react? Now, some people would say that legally you shouldn't be throwing the first punch. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a police officer. I'm not going to get into the legality of what is acceptable for the first strike per se. That's something that you're gonna have to look up in your own county and even your own state. So now, when I did the recent seminar with Ryan Hoover, we actually had a very in-depth discussion about throwing the first strike, along with what he believes are some of the best strikes to utilize, which we'll touch upon here in a little bit. But let's kind of just talk about the general scenario in which the first strike is what we believe to be acceptable. Now, again, you have to understand that this may be a situation that you don't see coming. For instance, Ryan used the example of, let's say maybe you cut somebody off on the road or on the highway, didn't realize it, you pull into a parking lot to do whatever shopping you're gonna do, and all of a sudden somebody zips up next to you, opens up the door, and the moment I get out of my car door, here they are face to face screaming at you for, again, whatever reason, and you had no idea that you even did anything wrong. Believe it or not, you are now in a fight. Whether or not hands have been thrown, whether or not they've actually even put a hand on you, they are now in your personal space. This is going to be my bad guy. But let's just assume now they're in your personal space. You are now essentially in a fight or about to be in a fight, and you may not even realize it yet. So this is now the scenario where you have to make the decision of, am I in a position and a scenario in which I have to throw essentially the first strike? Now, as I mentioned, you want to try to de-escalate the situation as much as possible, as you should any fight, especially because I don't know if this person's capable of, I don't know if they have any friends, I don't know if they have a weapon on them. So my best bet, regardless of my experience, is to try and de-escalate and just end the situation as quickly as possible without any physical harm to either party. That's not always going to be the case. Now, second option will be to try and de-escalate, and if not, get the hell out of there. Leave your car, take off running, just clear the space, clear the distance, and get away from this person as fast as possible. Again, not always an option. Maybe my back's up against my car. Maybe we're in a crowded parking lot. Maybe there's other people walking by and I just don't have the physical space to run away. I've tried to de-escalate the situation. That's not working. Now we're kind of getting closer and closer to the sense of, I'm afraid that this person's about to get physical. I can tell by their body language, I can tell by their tone, they're screaming, they're getting very angry, their hands are kind of starting to get a little bit more unpredictable, or maybe they're starting to fumble around with their waistband or their pockets a little bit more, which again are all signs that they could potentially be carrying a weapon or potentially being ready to throw a blind shot at you. So when it comes to throwing the first strike, again, this is your last resort. Everything else has failed. We essentially throw the first strike so that we can get ahead of the situation and that we're not on the reaction side. Because again, if I wait for them to throw the first punch, if they do land a good strike, then the fight's going to be over for me. But even more importantly, I'm now in the reaction, which means I'm behind everything that's going on. I now have to play catch up. I have to block or deal with the first strike, then the second strike, then the third strike, or maybe they're going to grab me or go in for a tackle, or they do reach for weapons. So now I'm behind the 8 ball and I have to play that catch-up game, which we don't want to do, especially if our life's at stake. I want to throw the first strike, but I want to do it in a manner that's going to end the fight as quickly as possible. And I don't mean in the sense that I'm going to knock this person out. Definitely don't mean in the sense that I'm going to accidentally or potentially take a person's life. Now, understand that by throwing a first strike, you have all those risks involved, which again, that kind of touches upon the legal side of things of, maybe I'm in the right of everything else. I throw the first strike and on the way down to the ground, he hits his head and ends up dying from that. That's a legal issue that now I'm going to have to deal with. But again, that's going to depend on your county, your state, and what the laws are specifically for wherever it is that you live. So look that up again. But again, let's just talk about how we set up this first strike so that if it does come to that, we can throw it successfully and in a manner that is essentially going to end the fight. And again, if we're not necessarily looking for a knockout, I just want to put enough pain or damage on this person where I can pretty much say, back off, move out of here, and they're going to pretty much obey at that point because they don't want to engage any further. Or that gives me the opportunity to then get away or to create space and get to a safe position in which I can call 911 or whatever else I need to do from there. Now, there are 3 strikes that I recommend that you try to utilize as essentially the first strike. Number 1 is a headbutt. 2 is a rear hook, and 3 is a rear open palm strike, which is what Ryan recommended, and we'll touch upon that one last. Now, of course, there are a lot of other things that you can utilize. I can kick them in the groin. You can do a jab cross if you want to. Like, again, at the end of the day, whatever you decide to do in the heat of the moment, you're just gonna have to deal with and commit to, and then deal with whatever the repercussions and everything are from there. But the reason that we choose these specific strikes to train with is because, one, they cause a lot of damage. They're extremely powerful, and you can position your body in a manner that when you do go to throw and land these strikes, it's there fast, you're creating a lot of damage, and again, you're positioning yourself in a manner that you can follow through properly on these strikes. Now, the headbutt, not one that I personally would like to use in these situations. It is an option. I'm more of utilizing the headbutt when I'm closing the distance. So if I'm coming in and reaching for a hand, like let's say maybe they're going for a draw and I'm coming in and reaching for that hand, I might drive my head into yours as I'm coming in to cause extra damage, but my main focus is getting control of that wrist at that point. That's where I would use a headbutt. I'm not gonna sit here and then just headbutt you across the face, but it is an option. And remember, if you are utilizing a headbutt, I pretty much want to take anything from my forehead and I'm going to strike anything at my opponent from their eyebrows down. I don't want to go forehead to forehead. I definitely don't want to go forehead to the top or side of their head. So I'm aiming to go forehead anywhere below their eyebrows to cause a lot of damage. But again, for me personally, it's more for me if I'm coming in looking to grab, looking to get my hands on as quickly as possible, that's where I'm gonna drive my head in as an added bonus. But again, if I am in a position where I do want to utilize a headbutt, same idea, again, driving my forehead straight into them, eyebrows down below. Now, as we get to these last two, and even with the headbutt, though it's not as important with the headbutt, your stance is what's gonna be the most important setup for this. And this is something that Ryan emphasized a lot at our seminar recently, is how we position our body and our stance for this. Now, let's say we're in an altercation again. I get out of my car, this person's right here in front of me, they're getting very aggressive, very vulgar. I naturally want to put my hands up. Never do I want to have my hands down like this, because again, if they do decide to throw a quick shot, I'm going to be completely caught off guard. So I want to make sure that I naturally just kind of put my hands up. Again, we're not throwing our hands up in fists. I want my hands up facing them so that if something does happen, I at least, at the very minimal, I can at least kind of just shield and close in and close that distance and at least crash into them a little bit. Otherwise, if I do need to throw strikes, again, that's why we have our hands up. They're already in a position that I can start striking at that point. So having your hands naturally up is a good position. Again, palms facing them, keep your elbows tucked to at least protect your torso a little bit. But this is just a good position for your hands. Now the feet is where we need to get very specific. If I kind of just stay in a squared up stance, or even if I just step back a little bit, I'm not in a position, because again, we're talking about a rear hook or a rear open palm strike. If I throw this hook in this position, notice how my feet and knees kind of intertwine with one another. I'm not able to get that full rotation because I'm tripping over my own feet. So even though I could probably do a good amount of damage for this, I'm limiting the potential of what I could be doing if I was in the proper stance from the waist down. So we've got the hand situated. So again, once you've acknowledged that you're in a fight, again, regardless of whether or not this person's actually laid a hand on you, you're in a fight at this point. As I put my hands up, I'm going to take my dominant leg, and not only am I going to step back, but I'm also going to step off at an angle a little bit. So again, it's stepping back and stepping off at an angle a little bit. Again, nothing drastic, nothing huge, but now when I do go to throw those strikes, notice that I can pivot on that back foot, which allows my hips to fully rotate through, which means that I'm able to essentially follow through with whatever strike I'm looking to do, which again, generates better power, better speed. And again, if we're looking to do the first strike in a fight to end the fight, that's definitely gonna do it. If I'm going for the rear hook, again, make a nice tight fist. Once I'm ready, I'm simply just pivoting and I'm striking all the way through. Now again, I'm not coming down low. I wanna pitch up my elbow so that, again, I can get the most power out of it, follow through, and essentially I'm looking to just kind of clip them right along the side of the jawline, maybe the side of the temple, but again, ideally, especially if they're running their mouth and talking, I wanna catch them off guard. So I'm gonna hit them right across the jawline as we follow all the way through. After that, once I have landed the strike, I immediately want to look to start creating space. So it's not one where I'm going to throw this hook and then look to follow in. I'm going to throw the hook and I'm going to look to create space and again, get to a safe distance where if for whatever reason I needed to draw a concealed weapon, I could. If I needed to call 911, I could. If I needed to protect kids or family members, I could. But it's the idea that I throw that first strike and I immediately create distance to a safe distance, essentially. If we are going for an open palm, I don't want my hand vertical like this because I'm limiting how much space I can actually cover on the person's face. So I do want to make sure that I have my fingers facing them, just for the sense that if they decide to lean back in the process, I'm still able to kind of graze across the face, which again is what I'm aiming to do. But the bulk of where I'm aiming on my hand is actually the palm. So again, same exact thing, same exact position. However, I'm just using that palm to come all the way across the face. Now, when I set this up, again, the important thing is that I'm following all the way through. I'm not just gonna stop once I hit their face. I wanna strike and come all the way through. And believe it or not, like the open palm can still cause a lot of damage. One thing that he touched upon for all of these strikes is you want to catch them off guard. Now, if you watch any professional fighting, some of those guys can take some legitimate, hard, powerful hits and be completely fine. Reason is, they're anticipating it, which means their body's tense, their jaw's clenched, like their body and muscles are anticipating the strike. So if this guy is anticipating it and I have my hands up and I wind up and I throw a good hook to the head, sure, I could potentially knock him out. Sure, I could potentially cause some damage. But if he's anticipating it and he's tensing up for it, it's going to be less impactful than what I'm actually aiming for. So one thing that Ryan really drilled into our mind is catch them off guard. Get them talking. Get them to answer a simple question, and as they're responding or as they're talking, that's my opportunity to go for the strike. And again, we're aiming for the jaw because if they're talking, their mouth is going to be open, their jaw is going to be open, which means again, I have a better chance of applying more damage. So the one that he used as the example was ask them a simple question such as, do I even know you? And if they go to answer it, the moment you ask the question, you don't hesitate, you ask the question and you immediately follow up with a strike. So just as an example, do I even know you? Now, if I can catch them off guard and I can do everything properly, get my hips rotated, get the proper body position, get the proper angle, get the proper speed, you're gonna do some serious damage and again, hopefully end the fight with that first strike. So is the first strike a good option to utilize? Absolutely. Just make sure, however, that you do check in again. What are your laws both on a county side and a state side, just so you understand exactly what you will be held accountable for if you do engage in a fight to begin with, but also if you're the one actually throwing the first strike. So understand, first things first, no matter what type of situation you end up in, if you understand that violence is imminent, if you understand that you don't have any other options, you've tried to de-escalate, you can't run away, you've tried to run away, you have no choice but to engage in a physical altercation of some sort, I would rather be starting it and getting the first strike in than being on the receiving end and playing catch up. So again, practice the headbutts, practice the rear hooks, practice the open palm strikes, and if you have any other ones that you prefer, practice them. That's the best thing that you can do. Go ahead, train them, and drop them down in the comments and let us know which ones that you think would be the best strike to utilize if you do have to throw the first strike in a fight.